Dragon, Dragon by John Gardner. There once was a king whose kingdom was plagued by a dragon. The king's knights were all cowards who hid under their beds whenever the dragon came into sight, so they were of no use to the king at all. And the king's wizard could not help either, because being old he had forgotten his magic spells. Whenever there was a full moon, the dragon ran wild, stealing things and causing chaos.
He tipped over fences and robbed graves and put frogs in people's drinking water and tore the last chapters out of novels and changed house numbers around so that people crawled into bed with their neighbors. And to top it all off, he changed around all the roads in the kingdom so that people could not get anywhere except by starting out in the wrong direction. That, said the king in a fury, is enough, and he called a meeting of everyone in his kingdom.
At the meeting, the king offered half his kingdom and his daughter in marriage to any man who could slay the beast. A wise old cobbler had come to the meeting with his wife and 3 sons. The cobbler's oldest son liked the idea of marrying the princess and having half the kingdom, so he accepted the king's terms and promised to slay the dragon.
Now, the cobbler's oldest son was clever. He felt sure that he could slay the dragon by playing a trick on him. He did not think he needed his father's advice, but he asked anyway to be polite. "Well, father, I'm off to slay the dragon. Have you any advice to give me?" The cobbler thought a moment and replied, "When and if you come to the dragon's lair, recite the following poem. Dragon, dragon, how do you do? I've come from the king to murder you. Say it very loudly and firmly, and the dragon will fall, God willing, at your feet."
The oldest son did not agree with his father's strange advice. He thought his own idea was much better. However, he kept his opinion to himself and set off to slay the dragon. Unfortunately, the dragon was not fooled by the oldest son's trick, and it ate him. The oldest son began to weep bitterly. He wished he had listened to his father. Next, the cobbler's middle son decided to slay the dragon. He was strong and felt sure that he could easily beat the dragon in battle. He did not think he needed his father's advice, but he asked anyway to be polite. The cobbler gave his middle son the same advice he had given his oldest son.
When and if you come to the dragon's lair, recite the following poem. Dragon, dragon, how do you do? I've come from the king to murder you. Say it very loudly and firmly, and the dragon will fall, God willing, at your feet.
What an odd thing to say, thought the middle son. The old man is not as wise as I thought. You have to take these dragons by surprise. But he kept his opinion to himself and set forth. Unfortunately, the dragon had seen the middle son coming, and it ate him too. What a fool I was not to listen to my wise old father, thought the middle son when he came into the dragon's belly, and he too began to weep bitterly. Now the third son saw that it was his turn. He was very upset and nervous, and he wished he had never been born. He was not clever like his eldest brother, and he was not strong like his second eldest brother. He was a decent, honest boy who always minded his elders.
The youngest son prepared for his journey. Before he left, he asked his father for advice. The cobbler told him the same thing he had told his 2 older brothers. The youngest son felt uneasy about his father's advice, but he trusted that his father knew best, and he set off to slay the dragon. When he arrived at the dragon's cave, he followed his father's advice exactly. The dragon had seen the youngest son coming and was hiding over the doorway. Now he craned his neck and looked out at the boy. The boy was wearing a suit of armor that was too big. He was holding a sword that was too heavy. He was so frightened he was trembling.
As loudly and firmly as he could manage, the youngest son cried, "Dragon, dragon, how do you do? I've come from the king to murder you." "What?" cried the dragon. You? You murder me?" All at once he began to laugh, pointing at the little cobbler's son. "He, ho, ha," he roared, shaking all over. He, ha, ha," laughed the dragon. He was laughing so hard he had to hang onto his sides, and he fell off the door and landed on his back, still laughing.
The cobbler's son grew angry. He demanded that the dragon stop laughing, but the dragon could not stop. The more the dragon laughed, the angrier the cobbler's son became. Finally, in his anger, he raised his sword and sliced off the dragon's head. The 2 older brothers crawled out and thanked their younger brother for saving their lives. "We have learned our lesson," they said. Then the three brothers gathered all the treasures from the dragon's cave and tied them to the back end of the youngest brother's horse. I'm glad I listened to my father, the youngest son thought. Now I'll be the richest man in the kingdom. They returned to the king's castle, and everyone was overjoyed to hear that the dragon was killed.